Today, we're looking at an article written by a former Google executive, Jenny Wood, who flat out says she's used manipulation to grow her career, and she thinks you should too. Let's go through this together. I'll break down what she's really saying and what she's not saying. I'll also call out the kinds of manipulation I've seen in the workplace and how you can avoid them. The greatest surprise might come at the end, where we find out who she's really manipulating. But first, let's look at Jenny's background. So you can see she has a lot of content about how she's been promoting her new book. So she's a newly published author and she's publishing her new book. We won't go into that right now, but we'll take a look at that later. If we go backward through her experience, you'll see that she was an author at Penguin Random House recently. Before that, she was at Google for 17 years. Wow. Most recently, as director of media operations and technical service managers. She's done some other work at Google, customer care analytics and insight strategy and operations. If you look at her education, you'll see that she has done master level courses in psychology. So she probably knows a thing or two about manipulation and a degree in economics as well. Okay, so let's see what she says. She says, I'm a former Google exec who's manipulated people to get what I want. When it's done right, it's an essential career skill. She's framing manipulation as an essential tool for your career. I mean, I get it. Sometimes you have to nudge people a little bit to get ahead, like convincing your boss to let you lead a project. But let's be real, manipulation also has a dark side, and I'm going to try to be balanced and talk about both sides in this video. What she's not saying from the tone of this headline in this article is that how this can backfire. Okay, so here you can see that this is an excerpt from her book. Wild Courage is her book. She claims to teach people how to use these unconventional traits like manipulation and selfishness to get ahead. She says manipulation isn't bad, and in fact, it can be essential for building relationships. It looks like after she had an 18-year stint at Google, she signed up with a literary agent and wanted to connect with successful authors and learn the ropes. So it looks to me like she's trying to build a second career after her time at Google. At the top of her wish list was meeting a person known as Vanessa Van Edwards. So Vanessa was a best-selling author and she used research into charisma, influence, and relationships, and it had inspired Jenny. She called her a dynamite speaker, terrific author, self-promoter, and basically she wanted to copy Vanessa's playbook. Now, she also said that through her professional network, she found a mutual friend to introduce them over email. It happened a few days before work travel would bring me back to her neck of the woods in Austin. It seemed like kismet. Okay, well, props to Jenny for working her connections. Networking 101. If you watch some of my other videos, you know I talk a lot about networking. So far, so good. Then she says, I emailed Vanessa, though we were just introduced, any chance we could meet this Thursday. I happen to be in town then through Sunday. I'd love to buy you a coffee and hear your thoughts about the book business. You know, this in itself seems to be great. She's suggesting that they meet over coffee, and I think this is fine to do if you're networking, you want to pick someone's brain. These are all good examples. But look what she hears back from Vanessa. Vanessa replies, I can't believe the timing. She wrote back, but I'm out of town on the same days for a speaking event. Too bad. Basically, Vanessa's giving her a polite no, and whether that's real or not, we're not exactly sure. But let's see what Jenny says. Taking Vanessa's friendly refusal at face value would have been an easy thing to do. My wish list even included other authors living in Austin. However, I was determined. Relationships are high effort and high reward investments. You can't let minor obstacles deflect you. Now, I'll pause for just a minute here because let's take a look and be mindful of the framing of this entire article. Remember, she's talking a lot about manipulation. And what I'm not sure about is whether in this case we can actually trust that what she's telling us is accurate, because she's basically saying it just happened to be happenstance that she was going to be in the same area as Vanessa. Is that true? This is the problem with talking about manipulation, as we will see later on. Okay, so she says, since we're flying in on the same day, I replied, I might be able to swing by your gate to say hi. Vanessa told me that her flight departed at 3:20 p.m. I scanned the departures out of Denver that day and promptly changed my flight to an earlier one. What luck, I roll back. My flight gets in just before 1. A $60 change fee to meet her in person would be a bargain at twice the price. Serendipity isn't found, it's made. Vanessa and I hit it off. Within minutes, I was drowning in helpful guidance and support. We talked until the very minute Vanessa boarded her plane out of Boston. Leaving the gate, I heaved a sigh of satisfaction. Now she says, "You may cringe at the manipulative way I handled the situation. If the idea of using a harmless lie to connect more effectively with someone makes you uncomfortable, you may have limiting beliefs about how and why people connect with you." Now we'll talk about this story and the lie itself. But I guess the question is any lie truly harmless? I think it's up to each of us to decide, but I see several problems here. It's a slippery slope because when harmless lies get us what we want, it's a positive reinforcing loop. And, Bernie Madoff, for example, with his $65 billion fraud that destroyed lives and ended up causing suicides, started with small lies about returns early in his career. But then he found he could just lie more and more to get even more investments. But it snowballed and ended in disaster. And there are several other famous examples like Theranos with Elizabeth Holmes and others that all seem to have started with people telling small lies initially and getting away with it. And then they started telling bigger ones and getting away with them. But actually, I think the more serious issue is that once you start lying to others, you run the risk of lying to yourself, and that's potentially worse. Because once you tell yourself stories that aren't really true, you begin to build an ego that can't really separate truth from fiction anymore. Now, in this case, I'm kind of skeptical about the whole story in the first place. I'm even skeptical about the story that she may have coincidentally been going to the same town that Vanessa is in. And it seems almost like a manufactured story about a little harmless lie to prove a point. It seems like she's working backwards from trying to figure out, well, how can I frame a harmless lie to showcase something I can maybe write articles and sell a book about? And why do I think that? Well, her whole story is is about manipulation. So now the question is, here's the catch 22. How can we trust that she's not manipulating us? If she's prepared to tell white lies to get what she wants, how do we know that she isn't lying to us to make us believe what she wants? So she's playing it off like it's a cute coincidence, but I'm calling possible BS. She probably knew Vanessa's schedule and planned this kismet moment to sell her books. But hey, this is just my opinion. I don't know the facts for sure. But what do you think? Comment below. Okay, so she tries to defend her manipulation by saying, "My reasoning was simple. Telling Vanessa I changed my flight to meet her would have put pressure on her, creating tension in a fragile new relationship. She might have felt obligated. If Vanessa's flight ran into an unexpected delay, she might worry about canceling our meeting and considering the hassle I'd gone through. Why create unnecessary stress? I wanted her to feel good about the meeting. When you're in a situation like this, spare the other person the gory details and make the connecting effortless for them. Sustaining relationships is all about reducing friction. Make it easy, make it fun, make it last." Now, I actually agree with this paragraph. I think it makes a lot of sense. You don't need to involve the other person with all the gory details. But then my question is, when I read this section, it again makes me think about this story just didn't add up. Well, if you look at what she said before, she said, "Since we're flying on the same day," I replied, "I might be able to swing by your gate and say hi." Then Vanessa told her that her flight departed at 3:20 p.m. So she scanned the departures out of Denver that day and promptly changed her flight to an earlier one. And then she just wrote back that my flight gets in just before 1. So technically, she didn't even lie in this case. She basically just used the information that Vanessa gave her to change her flight time. So, to me at least, that's not a big issue. If somebody gives you some information and you basically just try to meet their requirements without making them think too much about it or giving them all the details behind the scenes of what you had to go through to make it work, I think that's totally fine. But there's something that just doesn't add up with the way she's framing this entire story. There's either a piece missing, a piece changed, or I think the story is essentially fabricated to make for a nice little anecdote that she can use to put into articles. Having said that, though, it does make me think that yes, she understands how to use manipulation. Okay, she goes on to say that influence itself is neither good or bad. How someone uses influence is a separate question. I can agree with that. Manipulation is essential for relationship building. Well, I think it depends actually what you mean by manipulation. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. What do we actually mean by manipulation? And then what kind of relationships do you want to build? I think for some kind of relationships, Manipulation is probably essential, but those typically are not very good relationships. She says people become uncomfortable examining the mechanics of relationships too closely. I think that's true. So I'll give her credit for this. We prefer to connect organically. I agree with this. Most people do. And we sense something icky about approaching others with a strategy. And I agree with this too. I don't think there's anything wrong with thinking about who you want to network with, plan to meet them, reach out to them. Unfortunately, letting that stop you will dramatically limit the power of your network. I can totally agree with. Relationships are living, breathing things. Invest time, effort, and thought in them, or they will crumble. Again, nothing here that I can really push back on. So she says a new relationship is where you need to invest the most care and attention. Recent connections are delicate. Okay, makes sense. When you first meet someone, their immediate reaction is positive or negative based on superficial details like what you're wearing or how you carry yourself. And it's true, based on the world we live in, people often make snap judgments based on superficial details. So she says if you want to be judged on what matters, like integrity, intelligence, talent, experience, humor, or whatever, it's your job to prove these attributes. Never expect the other person to put in the work to figure out whether you're worth knowing. They won't. I think there's a lot of wisdom in the statement. Yes. Ultimately, you have to take responsibility to let others know what you're capable of, what you've done. You do have to promote yourself. But I don't consider those things manipulation. Manipulation, to me, involves active deception. So if you're actively telling a lie, actively presenting something with the intent to deceive, then I view that as manipulation. Then she says, what's intrinsically bad about getting people to do what you want? Call it leadership if you want, but that word is so overused it lacks any potency. Whatever the label, people in any walk of life succeed by befriending, convincing, motivating, and empathizing with and rallying others. Why did you open your mouth if you weren't trying to get someone to do or think something? We manipulate constantly. Then we call it catching up, shooting the breeze, or even parenting. Okay, so while she's pulling some verbal gymnastics with a bait and switch here, she goes from lying to talking about good things as manipulation. I mean, let's take a look at what she's talking about here. Catching up, shooting the breeze, parenting. Do people lie, manipulate, or present something in a manner that's not correct or completely true when they do all of these things? Sure. We all probably do some of these. The question is, do you have to? And I think the answer is no. You can catch up, you can shoot the breeze, and you can parent without lying. I don't consider that manipulation. Now, what I think is happening here, she might be either intentionally or unintentionally mixing manipulation, which generally has a negative connotation. And, like, again, to me, it involves deception of some kind with things that are often positive. And one of the reasons she might be doing this because she, in her career, to get where she is and where she wanted to be, she probably did a lot of this negative kind of manipulation. Now, again, I don't know her. I'm just guessing. And she maybe have seen in the corporate structure around her in the company, a lot of this being done as well. And to be frank, to be honest, yes, it happens a lot, a lot. And so typically to get ahead, she's not wrong that you have to be involved with a lot of manipulation. A lot of it can feel pretty unsavory at times. Speaking from my own personal experience, I've had managers who basically told me to lie to my subordinates. I've had situations where I couldn't reveal the full picture to one of the people on my team or to other peer organizations. And so, to some degree, you could say that I was pressured to manipulate others. Now, I didn't necessarily actively lie about anything, but still, not being able to present the full information is also, in some sense, a manipulation. Now, what I've seen mostly in the corporate environment is that that's the line that people who want to think of themselves as morally grounded, that's a line they won't cross. So, and I think, when you work in a corporate environment, it's really tough. You come across all kinds of moral and ethical dilemmas. But my suggestion to everybody would be to not cross that boundary and then get into the realm of active deception, where you're actively telling falsehoods knowingly. Okay, well, then she talks about generosity as a tool of manipulation. And she talks about the most effective tools of manipulation are honesty, generosity, and thoughtfulness. Again, I don't really see this as manipulation. but I think she's trying to craft a narrative here. We get more by giving. I can agree with this. It feels good. It brings us closer to people we care about, and it helps influence others like nothing else. Generosity is an easy and profoundly underused tool for getting what you want. Yes, I agree with that. Project contributors by name send follow up emails summarizing key points within 24 hours of an important meeting. Yeah, that all makes sense. Again, advocacy is not necessarily manipulation. Give people the opportunity to offer feedback on your projects, then show them that you acted on their feedback. Know your audience and speak to them with their values, preferences, and goals in mind. Adapt to your colleagues' working styles. Offer help proactively instead of waiting to be asked. I don't consider any of this manipulative. I just think this is all generally what you should be doing. And if you watched my other videos, you know I advocate for a lot of these things on this channel. Shifting focus from your problems to those of others will quickly change how your ideas and suggestions are received. Call this outward focus empathy if you want. But remember that empathy isn't about being a doormat. It's about paying attention to others, trying to understand them, and caring about what you learn. Yes, I agree with all of these things. I think you have to be careful for those of you who are especially empathetic, because while you want to have the empathy to be able to understand other people's points of views, you also have to make sure that doesn't cross too far into overriding your own needs and concerns and you becoming a doormat for other people. From there, it takes minimal effort to balance their needs and preferences against your own. Often it means so much to see someone make the slightest effort, share a recent win, ask after a sick spouse, or order a vegan option for the brainstorming session. Make sense? Manipulation isn't about shoving. Sway people, don't shove them. It's easy to become so focused on achieving your objective that you stomp on other person's sense of agency. I agree with this. As much as possible, you want to use the minimal amount of, let's say, force needed in any situation to accomplish your goals. She says, don't be that manager, don't be that partner, don't be that person. Manipulation has a bad rap for a reason. If you get what you want, but leave others feeling used or even abused, you're missing the point. Yeah, I think manipulation has a bad rap because of the way it's used typically in normal conversation and culture. Again, I think if you are talking about a manipulation as deceiving people, I think it does deserve a bad rap. The idea is to lead people toward an objective that serves everyone. I can agree with this. If you are leading and they not eager to follow, you've misjudged either the objective or their need for it. So stop pushing and start listening and empathizing. Whatever you do, don't force it. You might break something. Makes sense. Okay, and at the end, she wraps up it also for what it's worth. I fessed up about the flight change once Vanessa and I got to know each other better. A seeker of influence herself, she found it hilarious. Again, I'm a little suspicious about this whole story, and I think the reason she probably put this in here is because she doesn't want to leave potential readers or buyers of her book thinking that, well, she goes around telling white lies, even though she said it was okay if it doesn't hurt anybody. She still wants to come out on top as, morally okay. And I can understand why she might want to do it. But again, the story of hers just doesn't add up to me, at least. Let's take a quick look at manipulation in the workplace, what it is, how you can spot it, and what you can do about it. Manipulation in the workplace is often dressed up as emotional intelligence, but here's how I look at the difference. Emotional intelligence empowers both people. Manipulation benefits one and misleads the other. Let's look at how you can be manipulated and what to do about it. The dangling carrot of a promotion or raise. This one's classic. Your boss says, if you take on this project, you'll be first in line for promotion. So you work nights and weekends, but then the time comes, they're like, oh, budget's tight, let's talk later. How to avoid it? Get it in writing. Say, I'm happy to take this on, but can we put the promotion timeline in an email so we're on the same page? False urgency. Ever had a boss or coworker say, I need this project done by tomorrow, it's urgent, but then you find out it wasn't due for a week? That's the fake deadline trick. How to avoid it? Ask questions. Say, oh, is this tied to a client deadline? Can I see the email to clarify? If they squirm, you've caught them. The flattery trap. This one's sneaky. Someone showers you with compliments like, you're the only one I trust with this task. Sounds nice, right? But then they dump a ton of extra work on you. How to avoid it? Take the compliment, but don't let it cloud your judgment. Ask yourself, is this fair or am I being taken advantage of? If it's too much, just say, I'd love to help, but my plate's full. Can we split this with someone else? The guilt trip game. Ever heard, I did you a favor last week, so you owe me this? Or don't you care about the team? They're using past kindness or virtual signaling to pressure you into doing something you don't want to do. How to avoid it? You can say, I appreciate that, but I'm not comfortable with this right now. Let's find a way to make it work. Okay, so let's go back to Jenny Wood's profile on LinkedIn, and you can see that basically she spent the last little while promoting the release of her new book called Wild Courage. I gotta hand it to Jenny. She does know how to manipulate. In fact, you could say that she manipulated me into doing free advertising for her book. So let's take a look at her book on Amazon. It's got 5 stars, 28 ratings. I took a brief look at this before to see what some of the reviewers actually have said about the book. And you'll see that there's a quite a few 5 star reviews. Well, all of them so far. But I noticed something very interesting. I decided to poke a little bit and see who are these reviewers. Now, I looked for more details on some of them. The first one's name is just L, so I couldn't find any more information. But if you notice this very nicely written review by Eduardo, I did find some information on Eduardo. And if I go to his profile, you see, wow, I found that he's actually an author that's part of the same publisher as Jenny. So, yeah, Jenny is manipulating us by getting people that she knows to write really, really positive comments about her book. Now, look, I can't fault her for this. I don't necessarily think this is a tactic that other people don't do. But it might not be the most unbiased review. And it certainly points to how she continues to manipulate. Because you could say that some kind of manipulation like this might be good from her perspective. And let's take out someone else I looked at, Allison Koning. And I did find her as well on LinkedIn. And if you go to her profile, you can see that she says, 5 months ago, I pre ordered this book on Amazon thinking it was an opportunity to snag some freebies and be part of the launch team. So, and she had a fantastic experience that exceeded every expectation. So it looks like Allison was actually part of Jenny Wood's launch team for the book. Okay, so what's the takeaway here? Well, I think Jenny Wood is trying to be a bit controversial in what she's saying to basically sell her book and maybe get some speaking engagements as part of the next leg of her career. I think a lot of her advice is generally good. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but I think she's intentionally framing what's generally good as somewhat controversial, except for maybe the advocating of telling lies part. Even if they're white lies, I'd definitely caution people to be careful with those. So, should you manipulate people to grow your career? I suppose it all depends on what you mean by manipulation. I don't advise misleading people intentionally to grow your career, especially if you're going to be actively telling lies. Like I said, at most, stop at not giving people the full information. Sometimes it's just required as part of a corporate structure. For example, you may not be able to tell your employees that they may be laid off or that they are going to be reorganized into a new department. That's just the reality of corporate life. But to mislead people intentionally by giving them false information, I think just takes it to another level. But then the other challenge that everyone should really think about when manipulating people is that whether you are actively misleading by presenting false and misleading information or not, you constantly have to keep all of this in mind. And it becomes a huge load on people, both mentally and emotionally. And very often, this creates a lot of stress and anxiety in people. So that's another reason I'd caution people against this. So, yes, I definitely see a lot of manipulation happening, both the quote unquote good kind and the bad kind in the corporate world. And yes, a lot of people get ahead very quickly by using the dark arts of manipulation. And it may seem, at least in the short intermediate term, that they are doing really well because they do get the promotions, the raises, they do get career advancement. There's a fake it till you make it mentality out there. But I think for a lot of people, it does come with a long term price. Well, that's all for today. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, stay savvy.